Hello everyone from Mysticism and Modern Art Spring 2021 semester. In this video I just want to go over what I expect of you. I want to go over what the syllabus has inside of it. And it's basically going to be like as if we were in person for our first class and I just go over the entire overview of the class. So if you want to pull up the syllabus on your computer screen so as I go through it you can see what I'm referring to, that would be helpful. Alright. So, what is this course even about? Mysticism and modern art, what does that even mean? Well, what I'm doing in this course is I'm taking people who were mystics, and people who were mystics means that they felt like they had a direct connection to either God, to some sort of spiritual realm. They were channelers, they were seers, they were prophets. They were people who were outside of the traditional religious norm of their time, and these mystics and their mystic philosophies and seeing how they connect with artists of their time. So we're going to be looking at Swedenborg, who was a Swedish mystic. We're going to be looking at Helena Blavatsky, who founded Theosophy. We're going to be looking at a little bit of anthroposophy, not that much. And then we're also going to be looking at Zen Buddhism, which I realize Zen Buddhism isn't as mystical as the other, as the former ones I just mentioned. However, what I'm trying to do with this class is relate how spiritual philosophies influence art. Because I think a lot of times when we look at art history, we're thinking about, oh, what artist was the artist? What other artist was the artist influenced by, right? Like, who was Picasso influenced by? Oh, by Brock, and he was also influenced by political movements and stuff. But a lot of times there are a lot of artists out there that have these spiritual influences that we don't, I think they kind of get forgotten about or they're seen not as important. But what really opened me up to this idea was I went to the Guggenheim in 2016 or 2018, I can't remember now. But they had a big Hilma af Klint exhibit, and she was a Swedish artist who she was known in her time for painting traditional stuff, but she did a lot of esoteric paintings. She did paintings that were filled with metaphysical symbolism, just strange, mysterious stuff that we look at today and we're like, we're still scratching our heads. And I saw her work and it was just breathtaking. And then I realized that she had been influenced by Theosophy and Anthroposophy. And then I realized how big Theosophy and Anthroposophy were back in the 19th century. And I thought, wow, a lot of artists were influenced by these two movements. Why didn't I know that? So I started doing research and just looking into this subject. So that is what the course is about. It's about relating the spiritual philosophies of these mystics and these movements to art and seeing how they intertwine. All right, so let's move on to the second page. Actually, we're kind of going to skip the second page. It's you know, the boring stuff the university makes you do. The student will be able to explain the core mystical philosophies. You'll be able to do all this stuff. But let's move on. You can read it yourself if you want to. All right, let's move on to the third page, which is a note about writing intensive courses. So, I have not taught this course as a writing intensive course. I have just taught it as a regular course before. Writing intensive is intense, I've been told. What we will be doing is writing 3 papers and then revising those 3 papers. So you will be submitting a rough draft of those 3 papers to me, and then you'll be revising all those 3 papers and submitting a final polished draft. So you will be submitting 6 papers total in 7 weeks, which is a lot. It's a lot. So I realize that. So I've done a lot of the legwork for you in terms of like research. Now, there will be no other assignments than those papers. Those papers are your grade. And they're how I'm going to understand whether you understood the coursework. The course is basically spread out like this. You have 2 weeks to write the first paper, 2 weeks to write the second paper, and 1 week to write the third paper. Okay, and the third paper is a shorter paper. and it counts for less of your grade. So that's 5 weeks total. So there's 5 weeks where it's going to be very intense. You're going to be just writing a lot. But remember that these are rough drafts, so they don't have to be perfect. You know, you're just getting it all out there. You're getting it on the paper. That's what's important. The last 2 weeks of class is when we're revising all these papers. So the last 2 weeks of class, you won't really have to take any more information in. You won't have to be reading articles. You're just going to solely be focused on the revising process. So what is the revising process? It's not proofreading or editing. It's not just making small changes. It's not just correcting grammar. It's not just deleting a few sentences here and there. It's not just finding different words. Okay? When we revise, we really want to be making large-scale changes. So that's why I'm saying don't worry about your rough drafts so much first. Don't feel like, oh, I only have 2 weeks to read all this information and then write a paper. The rough draft is there just to get your ideas down, just to get it started, okay? And that's what this class is about. It's about the process of revising. So revising is making large-scale changes to the paper where you substantially reshape your paper and you make sure it has like a really robust framework, a good structure to it, where you make sure all of your ideas flow logically, where you make sure the tone of your paper is interesting. It's interesting to listen to. Where you make sure you have like a real voice, where you're not just repeating facts and citations in a kind of robotic way. You're also going to make sure that you have enough evidence for each argument that you make or each point that you make. And so revising is really digging in deep and saying, how can I make this a great paper instead of just a mediocre paper that I don't care about? And I will be submitting all of your papers to the Writing Center at the end. I have to submit one paper from each student with their rough draft and their final draft, so somebody will be seeing your papers besides me, so just do a good job, you know? Now, let's go on. What else? You can read the structure of the paper. What does the structure of the paper need to include? All right, that's high school stuff. An introduction, a thesis statement, the body, which is several paragraphs, and a concluding paragraph. You guys should know that from high school. Then there's, when revising a paper, ask yourself. These are things you can just ask yourself for the revision process. At the end of the page, it says essay formatting. Okay, all of your essays should be in MLA format. That's pretty standard. MLA does not specify a font, but I am specifying a font for this class because I just like if everything's like the same. That way, if somebody uses a super huge font, I don't have to be like, oh, you can't use that font, it's too large. I try to think of everything that students can think of before they do, because what I found is if I don't specify these things, then one student will do it. And then I'm like, well, I didn't say he couldn't do it, or she, you know? And then I feel like, man, I should have thought of that. So I'm trying to think of everything before you guys think of it. So the font that you should be using is Times New Roman 12 point, double spaced MLA. I have a large section under the content folder. It's called MLA and Writing Resources. It's the first folder and it has all the specifications for how to cite MLA. It has a link to sample papers. I'd suggest looking over that because sample papers are very helpful to look at. What else? All right, let's move on to the next page. How we communicate about revisions. So all of your papers should be saved as Microsoft Word documents, and I will have assignments up on Blackboard and you will attach your papers to those assignments. It's pretty standard if you've ever used Blackboard. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into your paper and I'm going to put the track changes function on in Microsoft Word. And then I'm going to, you know, do some proofreading, do some editing, if there's commas needed, if there's words I think that should be changed, if there's whole sentences that should be deleted. And Microsoft Word tracks my changes and it won't delete anything or it won't change your paper without you being able to see what I've changed. I also will leave comments. You can leave comments in Microsoft Word. They'll be on the right-hand side, so I'll leave comments. And you'll be able to, and then I'm going to attach the paper back onto that assignment. So when you get a grade for that assignment, you can say, oh, there's my revised paper. And what I want to say is I am not redoing your paper. I'm giving you suggestions. I mean, I may like tweak a comment, a comma or a word here or there, but you are the one who is revising your paper. So you do not have to take any of my suggestions if you don't want. You can say, well, I like this suggestion she made, but I disagree with her there. I am just giving you suggestions about how things that I think could be redone. But you ultimately are responsible for the final revision process. And I want it to come from you. I want, you know, I'm just the suggester or the guide, but I want you to be the final one. Don't think that just because I say, I think you should change this, don't think you have to. You have to agree with me is what I'm saying. I've taught a lot of art classes before, like studio art where you're painting, and, you know, painting and writing are creative processes. So for me to go in and say, this should be this way and that, if it doesn't come from you, then it's not right. So ultimately, you're the creator of your paper. So even though I will be making these suggestions, because I mean, I'm the teacher, I have to do something, right? So even though I'll be making these changes, I want it to ultimately, you have the final say on what gets changed or not. So I'll be putting in comments, I'll be doing changes on your paper, and then what happens is when I give you the grade, you can check your feedback and you will see that I have attached the paper back to you, and you will be able to see all the changes I made. And I'm going to go over this at the end of the video just a little bit so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But let's continue for now. Evaluations methods. So how am I going to grade these papers, these 3 papers that we're submitting twice? First of all, I want you to see the rubric I'm using to correct them. So if you click on that link that says click here to see the rubric I use to grade, that's how I'm going to be grading. And your final draft is really what I'm going to be grading. So I will give you grades for the first drafts of all of your paper, just so you know where you stand, you know, just so you can see, so I can make comments like, your grammar is atrocious, you've already lost 10 points just for grammar, or something like that. I won't say atrocious, I really will not say that word. But the first draft will be just a marker of where you're at, you know. Say you get a C on the first draft, okay, then you know you have to improve in these areas. Say you get an A on the first draft. Oh, what then? Do I even have to submit a final draft? Yes, you do. If you do not submit a final draft, and I've thought of this because, you know, there's always people who are trying to get away with the less work. If you do not submit a final draft, you will get a 0 for that paper. The final draft has to be submitted. And I really don't think, unless you're a master writer, I'll be giving you an A on the first paper. Unless it's, I don't know, it would have to be an amazing paper because, like I said, the class is about revision. It's unlikely that you can write a perfect paper in 2 weeks with the amount of information you have to take in it anyway. If you do not submit a final paper because you think, hey, I got a B for the first paper, that's good enough, right? If you do not submit a final revised paper, you will get a 0 for that whole paper, even if you submit a first draft. And this is just my way of preventing anyone from thinking, well, I submitted 3 first drafts, that's it, I'm done. No, if you don't submit any final drafts, you will get 0s for all of those papers, okay? Because the final draft is what I'm grading. It's the end grade. Moving on. If you look down at that first graph, you will see how I arrive at a final grade. Paper 1, 2, and 3, the final draft is what I'm grading. You can get 100 points weighted for the final grade. So the first paper is weighted for 35% of your grade, the second paper is weighted at 40% of your grade, and the third paper is weighted at 25%. The reason why the second paper is weighted for a little bit more is because it's the longest paper. The first 2 papers are the biggest papers. So the first 4 weeks of class will be your most intense. And then the last paper is a shorter paper, it's weighted less. And so you can see right down there, example of grades for imaginary student A, He got 85 points for the first paper, 90 for the second, and 94. And then I just time all those points by the percentage, and that's how I ended up with his final grade, 89.25. He gets a B+. All right, let's flip the page. There's your final grading system. It's standard across the university. Shouldn't be a surprise. All right, so if we look at assignments, I explain what I've already explained about 5 weeks of really intense reading, absorbing, and then writing, and then the last 2 weeks we are revising the papers. Everything in the class can be found under either the syllabus or the content section of the class. So really don't go anywhere else. There's no discussions, there's nothing else. It's just syllabus or content. And then within the content folder, there are a bunch of other folders, which I will go over. Let's just go through the assignments and the layout of the class. So as you can see, week 1 to 2, I've put week 1 and 2 together because your first paper is due at the end of the second week, which is Sunday, February 7th. All of your papers are due on Sundays by 11 p.m. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, because Sundays should be a fun day, right? But you should really be spacing it out. Now, you guys are adults. It's a lot to put all this work into 2 weeks, and you're gonna have to be self-motivated on how you space out this information. I mean, all online classes, I feel like you need a certain level of self-motivation because you don't have to go to class, you know? But what I would do is spread out all this information that you have to learn, because it's going to be too much if you wait till the last weekend to watch all the video lectures, read the articles, and then try to write the paper. You're not going to be able to do it. So you have 2 weeks, and during those 2 weeks, I'm hoping that you will look at all this information and be able to write a 4 to 6 page paper. So what do you have to do for these first 2 weeks? Watch 2 video lectures. You need to watch the lectures. I made these lectures. The first one is The Life and Philosophies of Emanuel Swedenborg. The second one is George Inness and the New Jerusalem. They're about 45 minutes to an hour long, all of my videos, and they take a lot of information and stitch it together. So the first video is about Emanuel Swedenborg's philosophies. The second video is about the artist, the painter, George Inness, and how Swedenborg affected his life and affected his art. I do want you to watch those video lectures. I do expect you to use those video lectures as citations, as sources in your paper. It took me a very long time to get all the information for this class. That's why there's no textbook, because I couldn't find these correlations in one textbook. I had to just read articles and watch videos and search and scour the internet for this kind of information to draw it all together. And that's why I'm putting up most of the information for you, most of my original sources, because it is hard. These are subjects that are not talked about all the time. They're not as ubiquitous as other subjects. So please watch the videos. That's what I'm trying to say. The second thing is reading assignments. So you'll see that after I list the video, there's a list of all these articles, maybe other videos. You don't necessarily have to read every article. But what I've done is I've done the research for you, okay? So you don't have to go out and scour the internet looking for these sources. Your sources are right there under the video for your paper. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at what your thesis statement for the paper is. And then you'll be able to figure out which articles are most pertinent to you. You might want to click on each article, click on each link, skim it, say, oh, is this going to be pertinent to what I'm writing about? And then you'll know if you have to read that whole article, because you do have to read some of them. I'm listing them all there for you. You will have to read some, because you can't just only use my videos as the sources for the paper. So the first paper is due Sunday, February 7th at 11. The paper specifications, it has to be a 4 to 6 page paper written in the MLA style that is double spaced Times New Roman, 12-point font. The work's cited page does not count as a page, so it has to be 4 to 6 pages of content. There is no title page. And you're going to be answering this question: to what extent did Emanuel Swedenborg's writings and ideas influence George Inness's art? It's a pretty broad question. I left it that way so that you can hone in on, 1 or 2 to 3 points and really hit those home in the paper. All right, let's move on to the next page. Flip the page. Now, in the second page, I've given you some questions that you may want to think about to focus your paper. I do want you to answer the general or the broad question, but I'm trying to give you extra questions so that you can see that there's many things you can talk about within this paper. For example, what did George Inness believe was the aim of art, or what was art's true purpose? How did Swedenborg's theory of correspondences influence Inness's work? How did Swedenborg's theory of influx influence Inness's work? What role did spiritual philosophy play in Inness's life? Did any other scientific, philosophic, or societal influences of the time run parallel to Swedenborg's work and also influence Inness's work? So you don't have to answer all these questions in your essay. In fact, please don't, because then your essay would be like 10 pages long. But you can use these sentences to narrow down the focus of your essay. And this is where the reading the articles will come into play. Say you think to yourself, well, there's a lot to talk about between Swedenborg's correspondences and George Inness's color theory, which there is a lot to talk about if you decide to go that route. Then you'll say to yourself, well, now I know which article I need to read, because this article is about correspondences, and that's what my paper is going to focus on, so I better read this article. In your paper, you will have to reference 5 other sources beyond my video lectures. So you will have to read 5 articles. I have, a few articles, web links for Swedenborg, and I have a few scholarly articles linked for George Inness, a few web links for George Inness. So out of those 6 or 7 web links, you're going to have to at least read 5 of them. So you are going to have to do reading besides just the video lectures. And you can do your own original research. I'm not trying to discourage that. I was just trying to make it easier for you guys. But if you want to do your own original research, I've listed Misericordia's online databases as a good place to go. I particularly like JSTOR. JSTOR is very helpful in finding scholarly articles. The web is also good. You can find a lot by just typing in Swedenborg plus George Inness into Google. You can. Just please make sure you're using a somewhat reputable source. Don't use Wikipedia. Please do not use Wikipedia at all. YouTube. There are also, surprisingly, a fair number of videos on spiritual philosophies and artists who were into these spiritual philosophies. So if you go to YouTube and you type in like George Inness, Swedenborg, you can find, you may not be able to find something for George Inness and Swedenborg, but you will for other subjects in this class. So don't discount YouTube. You may be able to find some interesting lectures that you can, listen to on your way to work, right? That's fun. All right, so flip the page. Week 3 to week 4, you have another paper due on that Sunday, February 21st at 11 p.m. This is the big paper. This is the big paper. So it's a 5 to 7 page paper. It's slightly longer. It at least has to be 5 pages, okay? 5 pages of content. And you're going to be absorbing a lot more information for this paper. Instead of watching 2 video lectures, you'll have to be watching 3 video lectures in 2 weeks. So that's like 2.5 hours worth of content just to start watching. It's a lot. So I realize this is like the most intense week, February 8th to the 21st. And the question you're going to have to be answering is, discuss how spiritualist and theosophical movements influenced 3 artists from the 19th and early 20th centuries. Please only use artists discussed in the lectures. So you're going to watch these 3 lectures. You're going to figure out your favorite artists, 3 of your favorite artists from these 3 lectures. You're going to pick them and you're going to write a 5 to 7 page paper discussing which spiritual philosophies affected these artists, how the spiritual philosophies affected the end result of their art. You can compare and contrast these artists' work. But like I said, the main idea is to tie the philosophies in with the art. So here are some questions you may find helpful in directing the focus of your paper. The first one is, what spiritual philosophies did these artists subscribe to? And how did spiritual philosophies contribute to their creative processes? So did their philosophies affect the way they worked? You know, which you will see they did. Some of them they did. Compare and contrast the artist's work. How did their artwork differ in style, appearance, and symbolism? Or how was it the same? Were there symbols that were used across space and time? How might the philosophies they subscribed to have influenced the end result of their artwork? So how did the philosophy actually influence the visual result? Which I think is kind of interesting. All right, so same thing, you can use my video lectures as a source, but I also expect you to use 5 other sources. So you will have to do reading. I've linked a lot of articles for the second round. Let's move on. Week 5, this is your last paper. Woohoo, right? And this should be not as difficult. There's only 1 video lecture to watch for this week because you only have 1 week, right? Zen philosophy and its effect on 20th century American art. And then what you're going to have to do is write a 3 to 4 page paper written in MLA style, and you're going to have to answer this prompt. Choose 2 artists from the lecture and describe how Zen philosophies and Zen art inspired these 2 artists to create modern abstract art. And I've given you a bunch of prompts below that can help you like focus and narrow in, but you're just going to have to, I've mentioned four artists in the lecture, and you're going to have to pick 2 artists out of the 4 and write a 3 to 4 page paper. It's not that hard. And you're also going to have to use 4 other sources beyond the video lecture. So you only have a week to write that paper, but then remember, you have the last 2 weeks of class to revise these papers. So if you flip the page, we're on the last page of the syllabus now, and it says week 6, paper 1, revised paper due, Sunday, March 7th at 11 p.m. So you have a whole week to do that first paper revision. Okay. Yeah, I think you should be able to really knock it out of the park with that paper. And then week 7, your last 2 papers are due, the last 2 final drafts. Paper 2 and 3, both revised papers are due by Sunday, March 14th at 11 p.m. So I think that's pretty easy to understand. If you have questions about anything, please email me. I try to check my email in the morning and at night, but sometimes on Sundays, you know, I'm out actually doing stuff that I like to be doing. So if you write to me on a Sunday, try to write before a Sunday, because Sunday is like a family day for me, and I will check my email, but in the morning, but as it gets later on in the day and I'm doing more stuff, it is harder for me to remember to check it. I hope you guys like this class. I hope you learned something from it. Make sure when you leave your reviews at the end of class to let me know what you really thought. You know, like actually write a few sentences. I'm not going to be offended if you didn't like certain parts of the class. It actually helps me understand what is valuable for teaching and what's not. That's all I really have to say. I am going to show you briefly how to do track changes in Microsoft Word. Oh, one last thing. When you submit your final paper, there should be no track changes. I should not be able to see any changes. It should be a polished final draft. It shouldn't even be a draft, a polished final paper. So make sure when you submit that final paper, there's no comments left on there, you know, everything's cleaned up, it's looking fresh, new, like a final paper should. I just wanted to say that. All right, so just hang on and I'm going to show you a little bit about the track changes, but I wish you a good semester, and I'm always available to contact through Misericordia's email, cnoto@misericordia.edu. If you have any other questions, just let me know. Okay, bye. Okay, so I just want to show you briefly about the tracking changes in the Microsoft Word documents. So when you send me a document, I am going to go to, if you can see up here, I'm going to review, I'm clicking on it, and then what comes up is track changes and new comment or show comments. Those are the important ones. So I'm going to hit track changes. If I just hit it once, that means that I can start making changes. Let's see, is it on? You can start making changes, like where if I highlight this and then delete it, it looks like it's deleted, right? But when I send this paper back to you, what you can do is you can click these red bars. Every time I've made a change, there will be a red bar on the side. Like say I've added extra words, say I've like, added extra words there, right? There appears a red bar, and that will show you where I made the changes. So if you want to see the changes, you could just click on these red bars and you can see the changes I made are in red. And then what you can do is you can right click. So let's say I go up to here and I right click. I can hit accept deletion or reject deletion. So if you don't like my change, just hit reject deletion. That's it, it goes away. If you like my change, hit accept deletion. Well, I guess where I made a comment, I highlighted this whole thing, this whole paragraph, and then I made a comment on the side. Move this paragraph towards the end of the paper, right? And I may make comments like that. So you can decide to delete the comment. You know, once you've read the comment, if you're like, yeah, I will do that, and you move the paragraph, then just delete the comment. You don't need it there. Okay, I couldn't figure out why this wasn't letting me accept the changes, but I guess if I write in something new here, if you just click off the red thing, it's there. Whatever I've written will just show up. So that's how you accept the change. If you don't like it, you know, just delete it. Just delete what I did. And then you can reject my deletion. But anyway, that's how your paper is going to come back to you. It's going to come back to you with a bunch of red lines on the side that you can click and see what changes I've made, and it'll probably have a bunch of comments on the side too. Now, what you want to do is, I'm going to try to remember to send back all your papers so that the track changes is off. So that when you work on it, you're not gonna be tracking your changes. You don't need to track them unless you want to. But if I've forgotten to take that off at all before I send them back, all you have to do is go to review and hit track changes again. And once you hit it again, it will not track your changes. So to turn on the track changes, you just hit track changes. To turn it off, you just hit track changes. It's pretty simple. And when you submit your papers, there should be no red. Okay, so the final draft of your papers, when they're submitted, I should not see any of my comments. I should not see any red. In the last 2 minutes of this video, I just wanted to show you what the course looks like on Blackboard, just to go over it. If you go on syllabus, this is where it opens up to. It'll show you the rubric, it'll show you this video, and it'll show you the syllabus, which I'm putting up tomorrow, which is Friday. But the content, most of the content for the course will be under content. So just click content and you'll see the MLA and writing resources. If you click on that, how to avoid plagiarism guide, definitely read that. Please do not plagiarize. I take off points for that. That is in the syllabus. I'm sorry I forgot to go over it. There's just so much to go over. But please, please, please read how to avoid plagiarism. There's a good video on how to plan an essay. Here's 2 MLA citation guides, sample papers, just briefly look over them. And, you know, how to write an introductory paragraph. You should know how to do that just in case. There's that. But going back to content, you can see I have weeks 1 and 2, weeks 3 and 4, week 5, week 6, week 7. If you go into week 1 and 2, you've got Swedenborg folder, a George Innes folder, and then the assignment for when it's due. So, you know for your first 2 weeks, you have to watch 2 video lectures. If you click on Swedenborg, there's your lecture, the first thing, lecture, Emanuel Swedenborg. Then there's the corresponding articles to Swedenborg. If you go back to content, go back to weeks 1 and 2, George Inness lecture. There's the other lecture you need to watch. Your lectures will always be the first thing in the folder, and you have to watch them. And then after that, I've got images. This is a PowerPoint I made of all the paintings that I talk about in the lecture, if you need to reference them again. And then I've got different articles by George Inness. And like I said, you don't have to read all the articles, but they are there for you depending on what you write your paper on. Right, so if you go back to content, weeks 3 and 4, you will see there's 3 tabs because there's 3 different lectures you have to watch. So under each tab, there's a different lecture. So spiritualism, lecture, and articles, there's your lecture, spiritualism. And I've put some stars by articles that I found especially helpful. So if I just really like the article, I thought it was chock full of information, I put a star by it. It doesn't mean that these other ones aren't helpful. It just means that these ones might be the easiest ones to read. And then week 5, there is your last lecture, Zen art lecture. There's your lecture, and there's your images for the lecture, and there's all your articles. I'm gonna try to actually add more to the Zen. The week 6 and 7 are pretty depopulated. There's nothing in there except an assignment where you have to attach your revised paper. So that's it, guys. I was going to show you a squirrel that was climbing up over on the bird feeder. He's always cute to watch, but he already left while I was talking. Even he got sick of me talking. All right, guys, you have a great day. Send me any questions you have about the class. Bye-bye.